somewhat difficult to make, but the steps are easy enough that I feel like I can teach you guys, and I know that it really does take a lot of patience, a lot of preparation, a lot of trial and error, but sooner or later you'll be able to master the French macaron like a pro. I'm going to be using the Italian meringue method that actually a lot of French pastry chefs like La Dude, Pierre Hermé, they use this method to make their macarons taste delicious. Most recipes have very similar ingredients, just maybe slightly different quantities, but it is basically so simple in terms of ingredients. So what you need is ground almonds. I will not be grinding these myself. These are just bought pre-ground. So just simple ground almonds. And this is 150 grams. And an equal part 150 grams of icing sugar. I always like to use a fresh batch of icing sugar, so don't be using one that has been in your cupboard for who knows how long. Get a fresh batch and use that because it does help. As well, we are going to be needing eggs. Now, the egg whites for this recipe are measured using a scale, much like the ground almonds and the icing sugar. You really do need a scale to measure your ingredients because, like most people say, baking is an exact science, and that is specifically true when it comes to making macarons. You really need to weigh everything very, very precisely. Now, these egg whites are actually aged, and what it means to age egg whites is that what we basically do is separate the eggs from the yolk. Now, the separated egg whites are in a Tupperware in the fridge for about a week. The day that I need to use them, I take them out and I leave them to be room temperature, and the quantity is 55 grams of egg whites and another 55 grams of egg whites, so 110 grams divided. And we are going to be using these in different steps, which I will show you along the way. One of the last ingredients that we're going to be using in this recipe is just regular fine granulated sugar or caster sugar, whatever you like, 150 grams. And to that, when it comes time, we're going to be adding 37 grams of water. This happens to be bottled water because that works best for this recipe, so I would recommend just using any bottled water or distilled water that you like, but you need 37 grams of bottled water. Also, it is optional, but I of course like to use coloring for the shells. What I recommend when it comes to using food coloring is not to use liquid food coloring, but rather a powder or, like what I have here, a gel. Gel food coloring is great because it is concentrated, so it won't be liquidy and thin out your macaron mixture. Liquid is the enemy of this mixture, so we don't want to be adding any extra liquid where we don't need to. So gel icing is great. But basically, these ingredients and these few tools will guarantee you success when it comes to making the perfect macaron. So I'm going to be adding my almond mixture to the icing sugar mixture. So now with that added in, we are going to be taking our sifter and sifting this mixture through. And what I like to do on my kitchen scale, I like to measure it out. That way I know exactly how much almond or sugar mixture I am going to be losing sifting this through. That way I can add it back in and keep sifting. Let's just sift this through. You'll find that you will lose quite a bit of the almond mixture, but that's okay because we are going to be every now and then adding a bit back in. So a bit more sugar and a bit more almond mix to whatever we happen to be losing. Okay, so my first sift through, I have quite a bit of the mixture left over. Why this is important is because we want our shells to look nice and smooth on top. And if we were to keep this in, it would look lumpy and bumpy, and we don't want that. So I took out almost 15 grams of ingredients. I'm gonna toss this, sift some back through, and then we're going to keep sifting. Okay, so I will say this is about the 5th time that I'm sifting this through. We just want to make sure that we have the ingredients precise and combined. There we go, exactly 300 grams of the almonds and the icing sugar. Okay, so this mix we're going to set aside just for a second. Right now, the egg whites. Like I said, it is about 110 grams divided, so 55 grams each. One of these 55 grams is going to go directly into this KitchenAid stand mixer. We are going to leave that aside until we need it. This whole process is going to happen pretty fast, so you want to make sure that you're nice and prepared and ready to go. Next up, the food coloring step. The gel food coloring, like I said, is great because it is not liquid, it is a thicker paste. A little bit goes a long way, so I'm just going to get a little bit on my knife and put this right into the other 55 grams of egg whites. I want my colors to be nice and pale. Of course, if you want yours to be way more vibrant, you can of course add more. Now, right now you won't necessarily be able to see what the color is going to look like, but everything from this point on is going to go quite fast, so let's get ready. Right now I'm going to be adding these colored egg whites into this mixture of the almond flour and the icing sugar. You can of course skip the food coloring step and just leave your macarons a plain color. That is totally fine. Now I'm going to be giving this mix a quick mix just to combine everything. This is almost going to look like a little bit of a colored paste. So now that this has just combined together, I'm going to quickly either put plastic wrap or in this case just a cloth over the top. We just don't want the mix to dry out, so we're setting that aside until we need it. Now for the next step, we have the regular white caster sugar, granulated sugar, and now to that we are going to be adding the 37 grams of distilled or spring water right into a pan that is going to be ready to go on the stove. So adding the water. Now we're going to get into action here. This is going to go right on the stove at a medium to low heat. I'm going to be using my thermometer. So once the sugar syrup reaches about 45 to 55 degrees Celsius, that is when I'm going to be turning on my KitchenAid and leaving that on a level 6 speed and allowing the egg whites to whip up and become nice and frothy. So while that is going, the sugar is also going, and we are waiting for that to reach 118 degrees Celsius. Once your sugar a couple minutes later has reached 118 degrees Celsius, we're going to be moving quickly. We are going to take the sugar off of the stove, and with the KitchenAid still running, we are going to be pouring that sugar syrup right into the frothy egg whites, lightly pouring it in a slow and steady stream, carefully going right in between the wall and the blade. Once all your sugar is poured in, we're going to be turning the KitchenAid to a level 8 speed, and we are going to be mixing that for about 2 minutes, I would say, or until your mix reaches about 40 to 50 degrees. Basically, when your bowl is no longer burning hot and you can lightly touch it, it should be ready about 2 minutes later. At this stage, usually I might turn it on to a level 10 and just give it a quick 20 to 30 second whip, just to make sure that this meringue is nice and frothy. This is an Italian meringue method, so we basically made an Italian meringue with the egg whites. The egg whites have become quite thick. They're not quite stiff peaks, but they are about medium to stiff peaks. Now I'm covering this almond paste mixture right here. I'm going to be putting maybe about a dollop or so, I would say about 20 to 30% of the mix right in here. Fold that in. At this stage, we don't have to be too gentle about it. We are slowly introducing the meringue to the paste, giving it a couple folds. Once it looks about incorporated, we can add the rest of this Italian meringue. The macaronage process is very important that you don't over or under mix. Usually when you see all the colors combine, it's perfect. If you don't have colors, you kind of want to hold up this spatula and make a figure 8. If you can make a nice figure 8 without it breaking off too soon or being overly runny, you're good. This is probably one of the more difficult steps because if you overmix, it will be a disaster, and if you undermix, it will also be a disaster. It's probably a little bit better to undermix. Now at this stage, I already have a piping bag right in here. This is actually a vase because this is a huge piping bag. I'm going to try to add the entire mix to the piping bag at a time. That way there are no leftovers. I'm just going to be sealing the top. Now, if you get a little bit extra out, that's okay. Now comes piping. What we are going to do is pipe right onto this parchment paper. I make them to be about 2 to 3 centimeters in size. Now your macaron batter will spread out slightly, so you might want to pipe them out a little bit smaller than you think you need. The tip is probably like a centimeter in diameter. You just want a small tip and you want to just do it in a straight motion and pull away. So pipe down and pull away. Now we're going to be banging this pan on the counter. About 10 times, hitting it underneath, a couple times. Okay, what that does is gets a lot of the air bubbles out. What I'm quickly going to be doing is popping some with this toothpick. and swirling it if you have some air bubbles that haven't come out. That should take you about a minute or so. You don't have to be perfect, and these don't have to be perfect. If you want the shells to look precise and to be the exact same size, you can actually trace circles on the back of your parchment paper, flip it over, and then pipe it out. I just do everything by eye and sort of match up each macaron shell at the end. Now, after we've banged these all out and removed any of the air bubbles, another important step is that this has to sit for 30 minutes at room temperature before these go into the oven. What happens in the 30 minutes is that the macarons form a shell. Right now, I can't touch these because they're way too sticky, but in 30 minutes, I'll be able to lightly touch these and they won't stick to my finger. That means a shell has been formed so that when these go into the oven, they will rise and create that perfect little macaron foot that we all know and love. So I'll see you guys in 30 minutes. In the meantime, I'm just going to clean up a bit.